Tonight is not a night for fixing anything. You do not need to understand what you are about to hear. You do not need to concentrate. You do not need to listen carefully. This is not a guided meditation. There is nothing to follow, nothing to achieve, and nothing you could do incorrectly here. If your mind feels tired, if your body feels quietly worn down, that is already enough reason to be here. There is no goal waiting at the end of this story, no insight you are meant to carry away, no improvement you are expected to notice. You are allowed to rest without making progress. Many nights, what weighs on us is not a single problem, but a collection of small, unnoticed pressures, thoughts that repeat, judgments that arrive automatically, memories that return without being invited, not loud, not dramatic, just constant. And over time, that constancy becomes heavy. Tonight, nothing asks you to set that weight down. Nothing asks you to let go. Nothing asks you to change your state. Instead, this story simply offers a space where that weight does not need to be carried. You may notice thoughts continuing. You may notice restlessness. You may notice nothing at all. All of that is fine. There's no correct way to be present here. You can listen closely, or you can let the words pass by without attention. You can stay awake, or you can drift in and out of sleep. The voice you hear is not here to guide you. It does not lead anywhere. It does not ask for trust or effort. It is simply reading. In some traditions, reading aloud is not done to understand, and chanting is not done to calm the mind. They are done so that meaning, evaluation, and inner commentary gradually lose their grip, not through force, not through discipline, but through repetition and sound. As this story continues, you may notice that the words begin to feel less important than the rhythm carrying them. That is not something you need to make happen. It happens on its own when nothing is being asked of you. For now, you can allow the body to rest in whatever position it has chosen. Allow the breath to find its own pace. There is no need to deepen it. There is no need to control it. Simply let this moment be exactly as it is. You are not behind. You are not doing this wrong, and there is nothing you need to remember. This is a space where effort is unnecessary, and understanding can quietly step aside. We will take our time. Many people think they are tired because something went wrong, because they failed, because they did not manage their time well enough, because they could not stay calm, focused, or positive. But often the tiredness does not come from a mistake. It comes from carrying things that were never noticed in the first place. There is a kind of weight that does not announce itself. It does not arrive suddenly. It does not feel dramatic. It simply stays quietly, day after day. It sits behind ordinary thoughts. It settles into small moments, while brushing teeth, while waiting for a message, while lying in bed at night, when nothing in particular seems to be happening. This weight is not made of big worries alone. It is made of evaluation, of comparison, of subtle self-checking. Am I doing enough? Am I doing it right? Should I feel differently than I do right now? These questions may not appear as full sentences. Sometimes they are only sensations, a tightening, a restlessness, a pressure that has no clear source. Over time, the body learns to hold this pressure without comment. The shoulders stay slightly raised. The jaw remains gently clenched. The breath becomes shallow without anyone noticing. None of this feels urgent, and because it does not feel urgent, it rarely gets rest. Even moments meant for rest can become weighted. Lying down becomes another activity to evaluate. Sleeping becomes something to succeed at. The mind checks in again and again, measuring how relaxed it is supposed to be. That measuring itself becomes another burden. Tonight, there is no need to identify where your weight comes from. You do not need to trace it back to a cause. You do not need to name it correctly. You do not even need to be sure that it is there. It is enough to notice the possibility that something has been carried for a long time without being questioned. Some of what we carry comes from comparison, not always with other people, but with past versions of ourselves, how we used to feel, how we used to cope, how we imagine we should be by now. Memory quietly adds its own pressure, replaying moments that feel unresolved, unfinished, or slightly out of place. And yet remembering is rarely a deliberate choice. Thoughts return on their own. Images repeat without invitation. The mind does not ask permission before bringing them back. It simply does what it has learned to do. This is not a personal failure. It is not a flaw in character or discipline. It is a function of a mind that has been trained to assess, to judge, and to anticipate. That training does not turn off just because the lights are dimmed. So if you notice thoughts continuing as you listen, that is not something to fix. If you notice the body resisting rest, that is not something to correct. These are not obstacles. They are signs of how much has been carried without pause. Nothing here asks you to drop that weight. Nothing asks you to let go of it. Trying to put it down would only turn it into another task. Instead, this story allows you to rest without solving the problem of weight at all. You can let the mind keep doing what it does. You can let the body remain as it is. There is no instruction hidden here, no technique waiting to be applied. As you listen, you may begin to sense that the weight does not need to be confronted in order to soften. When attention is no longer focused on improvement, pressure often loosens on its own. Not because it was pushed away, but because it was no longer being reinforced. For now, you can simply stay with the sound of the voice, or you can drift, or you can sleep. The story does not require your participation. This is only a place where the constant effort to carry, measure, and manage can briefly step aside. And that is enough. In some traditions, writing is not done to express what we think. It is not done to organize ideas or clarify understanding. Writing can exist without creativity, without originality, and without interpretation. This is where the practice of copying words comes in. Writing by copying is different from writing to communicate. There is no message to deliver, no insight to produce. The words already exist. Your role is not to improve them, explain them, or make them meaningful. Your role is simply to let the hand move. When people hear the word practice, they often imagine effort, concentration, discipline. But the act of copying text does not require intensity. It does not require belief. It does not even require interest. The hand traces shapes. The eyes follow lines. And the rest happens without instruction. The mind may try to get involved. It may wonder whether the writing looks correct, whether it is neat enough, whether it is being done properly. This tendency is familiar. It is the same tendency that evaluates everything else. But in copying, evaluation has very little to work with. There is no choice of words, no decision about structure, no personal contribution to judge. The usual mental habits begin to lose traction, not because they are suppressed, but because they are no longer needed. This is why understanding is not the goal. Understanding would immediately pull the mind back into analysis. Meaning would invite interpretation. Interpretation would invite comparison, and comparison would bring the weight back again. In copying, the words do not belong to you. And because they do not belong to you, they do not ask anything of you. The body begins to take over the rhythm. The movement of the hand settles into repetition. The eyes no longer scan for information. They simply move forward, line by line. Breath adjusts without instruction. Nothing dramatic happens. There is no clear moment where the mind becomes quiet. There is only a gradual reduction of interference. Thoughts may still appear. Memories may still surface. Planning may continue in the background, but they no longer sit at the center. They pass by while the hand keeps moving. This is not focus in the usual sense. Focus tries to exclude distraction. This is different. This is a state where distraction becomes less relevant. The value of this practice is not found in the finished page. The page itself is unimportant. It is not a record of effort. It is not proof of dedication. Once written, it can be put away without ceremony. What matters is the temporary suspension of ownership. For a short time, you are not producing. You are not expressing. You are not improving yourself. You are only participating in movement. Because there is no demand for originality, the pressure to be someone dissolves. There is no role to perform, no identity to maintain. The mind, relieved of responsibility, begins to loosen. This loosening is subtle. It does not feel like relief in the usual sense. It feels more like the absence of an extra layer, as if something that had been constantly added is no longer being placed on top of the moment. In that absence, the body remembers how to exist without commentary. This is why copying words can feel strangely alive, even though nothing new is created. Life appears not through expression, but through the removal of unnecessary effort. And this is why the meaning of the words is secondary. Meaning would reintroduce weight. Meaning would ask something of you. Meaning would turn the act back into a task. Here, the words are only shapes. The shapes are only movement, and the movement does not belong to anyone. As this story continues, you do not need to imagine writing. You do not need to picture a page or a brush or a pen. You only need to let the idea of non-ownership settle. There is a way of being present without participating, a way of allowing action without intention. This is the quality that copying words quietly reveals. Nothing is being added, nothing is being taken away, and yet something feels less heavy, not because it was removed, but because it was never placed there in the first place. Over time, even the sense of time begins to soften. When there is no goal attached to the movement, time no longer needs to be measured. The hand does not hurry, it does not try to finish, it simply continues until it stops. This is unusual for the mind. Most actions are shaped by an endpoint, a result, a reason for starting. Without that structure, the usual urgency has nothing to attach to. The moment stretches not because it is prolonged, but because it is no longer being counted. In this state, effort becomes difficult to define. There is movement, but not striving. There is attention, but not control. The body knows what to do without being told why it is doing it. Sometimes the mind notices this and becomes uncomfortable. It may search for meaning again. It may ask whether this is useful, productive, or worthwhile. These questions are familiar. They arise whenever purpose dissolves, but the questions do not need answers. They fade when they are not fed. The hand continues. The shapes repeat. And slowly, the sense of being watched by oneself begins to weaken. There is less self-observation, less commentary, less internal narration explaining what is happening. This absence is not empty, it is spacious. In that space, the body experiences a rare kind of permission. Permission to exist without being evaluated. Permission to move without being interpreted, permission to spend time without justifying it. This permission does not arrive as a thought. It is felt as a slight easing, a release so subtle it could be missed if it were looked for. And because it is not dramatic, it can last. Writing in this way does not correct the mind. It does not discipline thought. It simply gives thought less to do. Without resistance, without suppression, the mind steps back on its own. This is what makes the practice quietly alive. Life appears when unnecessary effort recedes, not through excitement or stimulation, but through the simple relief of not being required to perform. Nothing needs to be held in place. Nothing needs to be remembered. Once the movement ends, it ends completely. There's no lesson to carry forward, no state to recreate, no improvement to maintain. The practice leaves no trace, and that is its strength. As you listen now, the same quality can be present. You do not need to imagine the movement. You do not need to replicate it. Simply allowing the idea of action without ownership is enough. The story does not ask you to participate. It does not need your attention to function. Like copying words, it continues whether or not it is being watched. And in that continuation, weight loses its grip. Not because it was removed, not because it was solved, but because nothing is being added to it anymore. For most of the day, a voice is already speaking inside. It comments, it evaluates, it remembers, it anticipates. Even in silence, this voice continues, filling the space with explanations and reactions. Reading aloud introduces a different kind of voice, one that does not respond, one that does not argue, one that does not comment on what it is saying. The sound moves forward without turning back on itself. This is why chanting and reading aloud are not meant to calm the mind. Trying to calm the mind would only give the inner voice another task, another role to perform. Instead, the external voice gently takes up space, leaving less room for internal narration. When sound is continuous, the mind does not disappear. It simply steps back. Thoughts still arise, but they are no longer the loudest presence in the room. They become background rather than center. In chanting, the meaning of the words is intentionally secondary. Meaning would invite interpretation. Interpretation would invite judgment. Judgment would invite comparison. The familiar cycle would begin again. Sound without emphasis interrupts that cycle. The rhythm carries the voice forward. Breath follows naturally. The body listens without needing to understand. At first, the mind may try to listen closely. It may try to follow each word. It may try to stay present. This effort is understandable. It is how listening usually works. But here, close listening is not required. You do not need to stay with the sound. You do not need to track it. You do not need to hold on to it. The sound continues whether or not attention remains. As the voice repeats, something subtle begins to happen. The inner voice, so used to speaking without interruption, finds itself without a clear place to enter. It cannot compete with steady sound. It cannot easily comment on repetition. Without confrontation, it grows quieter. This quiet is not silence. It is a reduction of internal speech, a thinning of commentary, a softening of the constant explanation of experience. The body responds before the mind notices. The jaw loosens. The breath deepens slightly. The rhythm of the sound aligns with physical sensation, not through intention, but through exposure. This is not control, it is resonance. Reading aloud does not teach the mind what to think. It changes what occupies space. By filling the moment with sound, it leaves less room for self-directed narration. And because the sound is not personal, it does not trigger emotional response. It does not belong to your story. It does not demand agreement or belief. It is simply present. As this story continues, you may notice that the words begin to blur together. Sentences lose their edges. The voice becomes texture rather than message. This is not a loss of attention. It is a shift in how attention functions, from grasping to receiving, from tracking to allowing. You do not need to assist this shift. You do not need to encourage it. The repetition will do the work on its own. And if thoughts return, that is fine. They do not interrupt anything. The sound does not resist them. It continues beneath them, steady and unchanged. This is how reading aloud creates rest, not by stopping thought, but by giving thought less authority. The voice moves forward. The inner voice fades slightly, and in that small change something feels less crowded. As the sound continues, time begins to behave differently. Without a message to decode or a point to reach, listening no longer needs to move forward. It can remain where it is, moment by moment, without progression. This can feel unfamiliar. The mind is accustomed to advancing, to following, to completing. When sound does not lead anywhere, the urge to keep track slowly weakens. There is nothing to arrive at, so there is no reason to hurry. In chanting, repetition is not a flaw. It is the feature that allows the inner voice to rest. When nothing new is being introduced, the mind cannot collect information. Without information to collect, it has less reason to speak. Sometimes attention drifts away entirely. The sound remains, but it is no longer being actively heard. This is not a problem. In fact, this is one of the moments where the practice is doing its work. Hearing without listening is different from distraction. Distraction pulls attention outward. Here, attention simply loosens its grip. The sound becomes part of the environment, like wind or distant rain, present but not demanding, steady but not insistent. In this state, the body receives the vibration directly, not as meaning, not as instruction, but as physical presence. The chest subtly resonates, the throat relaxes, the breath aligns without being guided. No effort is required to maintain this alignment. The body recognizes rhythm on its own. If the mind notices this and tries to observe it, the commentary may briefly return. This is natural. The habit of explaining experience does not disappear all at once, but even commentary becomes quieter when it is surrounded by sound. Words lose their sharpness, thoughts shorten, the space between them grows slightly wider. There is no need to protect this space. There is no need to keep it intact. The sound will continue whether or not it is being noticed. This is why chanting is often practiced for long periods of time, not to deepen understanding, but to allow understanding to dissolve. Over time, the voice becomes less like speech and more like texture. The moment no longer asks to be understood. It only needs to be inhabited. As this happens, the sense of me listening also begins to soften. The sound is there, the body is there, but the act of listening becomes less personal. There is simply sound moving through space. In this simplicity, the mind does not need to defend itself. It does not need to prepare a response. It does not need to evaluate what is happening. It can rest alongside the sound, without effort, without commentary. And if sleep arrives here, that is welcome. If wakefulness remains, that is also fine. The practice does not prefer one over the other. The voice continues. The inner voice steps further back, and the space inside becomes less crowded, not through control, but through presence. There comes a point when meaning is no longer necessary, not because it has been resolved, and not because it has been understood, but because it no longer holds attention in the same way. At first, words are heard as messages. They point to something. They suggest ideas. They invite interpretation. This is how listening usually works. The mind reaches for meaning automatically, almost without noticing. But when words repeat, and when nothing new is being introduced, the effort to interpret slowly loses momentum. The mind looks for something to grasp and finds nothing solid to hold. This is not confusion. Confusion still seeks clarity. This is different. It is the quiet realization that clarity is not required. As meaning loosens, the edges of sentences soften. Individual words become less distinct. They are still present, but they are no longer separate objects demanding attention. The sound remains, but the urge to translate it into understanding weakens. This can feel strange at first. The mind may briefly search for footing. It may wonder whether it is missing something important. This reflex is familiar. It appears whenever control begins to slip. But nothing here is being lost. Meaning does not disappear. It simply steps aside. In this space, sound is no longer a carrier of information. It becomes rhythm, texture, movement through time. The body receives it differently than the mind does. Breath aligns without instruction. Muscles respond without direction. The nervous system recognizes pattern and settles into it. There is no need to follow this process. It unfolds on its own when effort is no longer applied. You may notice moments where you cannot recall what was just said. This is not a lapse. It is a sign that listening has shifted from grasping to allowing. Memory is not required here. Attention does not need to be continuous. The mind can drift, return, drift again. The sound remains unchanged. As meaning loosens further, even the idea of listening becomes less defined. There is sound but no clear listener. Experience continues, but without commentary describing it. This is not absence. It is presence without labels. Nothing needs to be named. Nothing needs to be placed in order. The moment is sufficient without explanation. In this state, effort has nowhere to attach. There is nothing to improve, nothing to maintain, nothing to hold in place. The body rests inside repetition. The mind rests inside non-demand. And slowly, the sense of carrying something begins to thin. Not because it was set down deliberately, but because it was no longer reinforced by meaning. Here, words are free to dissolve into sound. Sound is free to dissolve into silence. And silence does not need to be noticed to be effective. If sleep approaches here, there is no need to resist it. If wakefulness remains, there is no need to sustain it. The story does not depend on your attention. Meaning does not depend on your understanding. Everything can continue, even as effort fades. As meaning continues to loosen, the mind may notice a quiet unease. Without meaning to hold on to, the usual sense of orientation softens. This is not disorientation. It is simply the absence of reference points. The mind is accustomed to locating itself through understanding. When understanding is no longer central, the question of where am I in this briefly appears, and then just as briefly it fades. Nothing here requires positioning. Sound does not move toward a conclusion. It does not point forward. It does not gather itself into a message. It simply continues moment after moment without accumulation. This continuity allows the mind to stop checking progress. There is no progress to measure, no state to compare with the previous one. Each moment stands on its own. As this happens, evaluation weakens. The mind has less material to judge. Without meaning, there is no scale. Without a scale, comparison dissolves. This is not a special state to be achieved. It is what remains when comparison has nothing to work with. The body senses this before thought does. Muscles soften slightly. The face relaxes without instruction. The breath finds a slower rhythm without being guided. These changes are not responses to understanding. They are responses to the absence of demand. In this space, memory loses urgency. Thoughts may still return, but they arrive without insistence. Images appear and fade without pulling attention behind them. There is no need to push them away. There is no need to follow them. They do not interfere with what is happening. The sound continues beneath them, steady and neutral. Eventually, even the idea of sound begins to blur. It is still present, but it is no longer an object. It becomes part of the background field, like darkness in a quiet room. At this point, effort has fully stepped aside. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to hold, nothing left to interpret. This is where rest becomes possible without intention, not because the mind decided to rest, but because it was no longer required to perform. Here the story no longer needs to be heard. It only needs to continue, and it will continue regardless of attention. If awareness fades in and out, that is welcome. If sleep deepens, that is welcome. If wakefulness lingers quietly, that is also welcome. Meaning has done its work by leaving, and in its absence, the moment becomes light, unburdened, and sufficient. There is a difference between becoming lighter and no longer being weighed down. Becoming lighter suggests effort. It suggests that something was actively removed, but the state we are describing here is quieter than that. Unweighted does not mean that burdens were lifted. It means that for a moment nothing is being placed on top of the experience. Nothing is added. Nothing is required. Nothing is expected. In this state, the body is not trying to settle. It is simply not being disturbed. The mind is not trying to relax. It is simply not being asked to work. This can feel unfamiliar. Many forms of rest still involve doing something correctly, breathing a certain way, letting go in the right order, achieving a particular calm. Those efforts, even gentle ones, still carry weight. Here, there is no technique to apply, no posture to maintain, no internal adjustment to make. Unweighted means that experience is allowed to arrive without commentary. Thoughts may still appear, sensations may still shift, but nothing is being evaluated as good or bad, successful or unsuccessful. The usual labels are not being attached. Without labels, there is no pressure to respond. The body recognizes this immediately. It stops bracing. The subtle readiness that is usually present begins to dissolve. Muscles no longer prepare for the next moment. They rest in the one that is already here. The breath follows this change naturally. It becomes less managed, less noticed. It moves without being monitored. This is not something to observe closely. Observation itself would add weight. This is something that happens when attention is no longer required to supervise. In an unweighted state, Time does not feel tight. It does not need to be filled or used well. It does not need to be justified. Moments pass without leaving residue. Nothing is being carried forward. This does not mean that life has become simple or resolved. It only means that right now nothing extra is being added to it. The mind does not need to explain this state. Explanation would pull weight back in. Understanding would create distance. Here, experience remains close, immediate, and sufficient. If there is a sense of openness, that is fine. If there is only neutrality, that is also fine. Unweighted does not require a particular feeling. It is defined not by what is present, but by what is absent. Absent is the pressure to improve the moment. Absent is the habit of comparison. Absent is the need to remember how this feels later. There is no need to preserve this state. It will change on its own, and that is not a problem. For now, it is enough that nothing is being placed on top of this moment. The body rests because it is no longer being asked to hold anything up. The mind rests because it is no longer being asked to explain anything. This is what unweighted feels like. Not dramatic, not euphoric, simply unobstructed. In this state, nothing needs to be held in place. There is no sense that something important might slip away if attention relaxes. Experience does not feel fragile. It does not require protection. Often, even moments of calm carry a hidden tension, a sense that they should last, that they should be noticed before they disappear, that awareness must stay alert in order to keep them intact. Unweighted means that this tension is absent. There is no need to secure the moment, no need to deepen it, no need to make sure it is happening correctly. The moment is allowed to pass through without leaving a trace. Because nothing is being held, there is also nothing to lose. If a thought appears, it appears. If it fades, it fades. Neither movement changes anything essential. The body responds to this permission by releasing subtle forms of effort, not large movements, just small ones, the kind that usually go unnoticed because they are always present. The forehead smooths slightly, the tongue rests more fully in the mouth. The breath no longer checks itself. These changes are not instructions being followed. They are the natural result of effort no longer being reinforced. In an unweighted state, attention does not need to be continuous. It can flicker, it can drift, it can disappear for moments at a time. Nothing requires supervision. This is why unweighted rest does not feel like rest in the usual sense. There is no contrast, no sense of having arrived somewhere better. It simply feels unobstructed. Life is not paused. Experience is not suspended. Things continue to happen, but they do not accumulate. Nothing stacks on top of anything else. Because of this, there is no story being formed about what is happening now, no narrative to carry forward, no lesson being created in the background. And without a story, there is no burden. The mind does not need to ask what this means. The body does not need to decide what to do with it. There is nothing here to use later. Unweighted does not promise relief. It does not offer insight. It does not claim permanence. It simply allows this moment to exist without obligation. If sleep begins to approach here, it does so quietly, without announcement, without ceremony. If it does not, that is also fine. Nothing depends on the outcome. For now it is enough that nothing is being added, nothing is being carried, nothing is being prepared for later. The moment remains open, neutral, and complete on its own. At some point, listening no longer needs to be active. The sound continues, but it no longer asks to be followed. It no longer invites attention. It is simply there. This is where the role of the voice begins to change. Until now, the voice has occupied space. It has gently replaced inner commentary. It has given the mind less room to speak. But now, even that support becomes less necessary. The sound can remain without being heard. You may notice moments where the voice fades into the background entirely, where you cannot recall what was just said, where awareness drifts away and then returns without effort. This is not something to correct. There is no need to stay with the voice. There is no need to keep listening. Nothing will be missed by letting go of attention. The story has already done what it needed to do. From here, the sound functions more like atmosphere than language. It becomes part of the room, part of the night, something present but not central. The mind does not need to decide when to stop listening. That decision happens on its own when effort is no longer applied. Thoughts may appear briefly, then fade. Sensations may shift, then settle. None of this requires involvement. The body understands this transition well. It recognizes when guidance is no longer necessary. Muscles soften further. Breathing slows without being directed. There is no instruction hidden here, no final step to complete, no moment to mark as important. You do not need to remember how you arrived here. As the voice continues, you are free to leave it behind, free to let it pass without notice, free to allow sleep to deepen in its own way. If awareness drifts, that is welcome. If it disappears entirely for a time, that is welcome too. Nothing depends on staying awake. The sound does not require a listener. It does not depend on understanding. It does not need to be acknowledged. It continues because it continues. From here on, the night can take over. The body can rest in its own rhythm. The mind can loosen its hold without effort. There is nothing left to do. The voice will remain for a while longer, and then even that will no longer matter. As attention loosens further, the need to know where you are in the story disappears. There is no longer a sense of progress or sequence. The voice may be present, but it no longer occupies a clear position in awareness. This is not confusion. It is the absence of tracking. Tracking requires effort. It requires holding a thread. When that thread is released, experience does not collapse. It continues quietly, without direction. The sound no longer needs to support you. It no longer needs to replace anything. It can simply exist alongside sleep without taking part in it. You might notice that hearing becomes uneven. Sometimes the voice is there, sometimes it is not. This fluctuation is not important. It does not need to be stabilized. There is no ideal point to remain in. The body settles into this uncertainty easily. It does not ask where the sound is going. It does not try to stay with it. The nervous system recognizes that no response is required. This is where effort truly ends. Even the idea of resting begins to fade. There is no longer a sense of, now I am resting. There is simply the absence of tension that required that label. Nothing is being prepared. Nothing is being completed. There is no closing gesture needed. The voice may feel distant now, or it may feel close. Both are fine. Distance and closeness no longer carry meaning. The story does not conclude. It does not resolve. It does not arrive at a final point. Instead, it gradually loses relevance. This loss is gentle. It does not remove anything. It simply stops asking for engagement. From here, the sound can be treated like any other background presence, like the hum of a room, like air moving through space. If awareness slips away completely, there is nothing to return to. If it comes back briefly, there is nothing to rejoin. The night holds everything without instruction. There is no need to remain here. There is no need to go anywhere else. The sound will continue, and you are free to let it go. There is nothing more you need to hear now. The voice has done its work by stepping aside. Understanding has already loosened. Effort has already faded. From here, words are no longer necessary. What follows is not instruction. It is not explanation. It is not something to focus on or remember. Only sound remains. You do not need to stay with it. You do not need to listen closely. You do not need to understand what is being spoken. Let the sound exist on its own. If attention drifts, let it drift. If sleep deepens, let it deepen. If awareness comes and goes, let it do so freely. Nothing is required of you now. The sound you are about to hear has been carried through time, shaped by breath and repetition, offered without demand. It does not ask for belief. It does not ask for effort. It does not ask for response. It continues whether or not it is heard. You can allow the body to rest fully, allow the night to take over, allow everything else to fade. There is nothing left to do, only to rest. There is nothing else you need to do. Sometimes peace is not something we must learn. It is something we remember. The world pulls us outward, toward goals, toward noise, toward endless motion. But when the heart grows quiet, we begin to sense a deeper rhythm beneath it all, a rhythm that has always been waiting, softly calling us home. This quiet home lives inside you, but it can be easy to forget. That is why Gassho exists, not to add anything new, but to help you return. A space built for stillness, for reflection, for the gentle work of being. In its name, Gassho, there is a gesture, two hands meeting in respect and gratitude, a gesture of unity between self and world, between heart and breath, between sound and silence. When you open the Gassho app, you are not entering another screen. You are stepping into a small temple that travels with you, a place where you can sit without expectation, breathe without demand, and listen without effort. Inside you will find guided meditations, stories inspired by Buddhist wisdom, and the steady presence of sutras, not as lessons, but as companions. The sound you are about to hear is one of those companions, a sound carried through generations, a sound shaped by breath, devotion, and time. You do not need to understand the words. You do not need to follow the rhythm. You do not need to stay awake for it. Let the sound arrive as it is. Let it move through awareness without resistance. Let it remain even as attention fades. There is nothing left to do, only to rest. Let the breath settle. Let the body sink, and simply listen. The sound of the sutra continues, offered from a temple in the quiet mountains of Koya-san, shared here through the Gassho app whenever you wish to return to silence.
有楽主 小法九小有一世界先生欲と調整感銘特性小法有研究楽宗教福心小有常連定本然無理合創前小有千人因地心正常連有人公三万